Good afternoon and good morning to everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. So we're excited to have you here for our webinar, Ready to Land Your Food and Beverage Company in the United States, Legal Aspects of Doing Business in the U.S. Market. As many of you know, the U.S. remains one of the most dynamic and opportunity-rich markets in the world, especially for innovative food and beverage brands. But with the opportunity comes complexity. Entering the U.S. market isn't just about great products. It requires a strong understanding of the regulatory landscape, legal obligations, and business structures that can set up for long-term success. Today, we will walk you through the key legal considerations every international F&B company should know, from entity formation and labeling requirements to import rules, liability issues, and compliance strategies. Whether you are in the early exploration stage or already preparing your market entry, this session will give you the clarity and confidence you need to move forward. So once again, welcome, and let's dive into how you can bring your brand to the United States the right way. I'm Irma Šlaičiūnaitė-Černiauskienė, Chief of Staff at Litfood, and before the start, I will give small guidance in terms of technical details. Kindly be informed that our webinar is recorded, and if you have a question to our dear speakers, please do not hesitate to ask by clicking the icon raise your hand, and kindly inquire in English during our Q&A session. And it's an honor to introduce our dear speakers. His Excellency Gediminas Varvuolis, Ambassador of the Republic of Lithuania to the United States of America, Mr. Ivars Slokenbergs, the founder of Slokenbergs PLLC, and Mr. Mindaugas Simonaitis, Attaché for Agricultural and Commercial Affairs at the Embassy of the Republic of Lithuania to the United States of America. So let's start with the welcoming speech of the Ambassador of the Republic of Lithuania to the United States of America, His Excellency Gediminas Varvuolis. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, labas rytas, labryt. Maybe also in Latvian, because one of our speakers has Latvian origins. So I'm very happy to join this webinar. For us here in Washington, D.C. at the embassy, economic diplomacy is one of our key priorities. We try to help Lithuanian businesses as much as possible. And of course, agribusiness is one of the trademarks of Lithuania, has always been, and I think we have to continue. We clearly have an image in Europe with agribusiness, but I think it's important to try to conquer these lands here in the West, because US definitely, as you, Irma, have mentioned in the introduction, it's a very it's a place, it's a market that has a lot of potential. I'll give you an overview of where we stand with the U.S. economy. With Mindaugas, my colleague here, we prepared some points, so I'll share those with you, and then later, of course, Mindaugas will be here to answer your questions. So to start with, I would say that the U.S. is really it's a promising market, but also a challenging market, very competitive, very heavy, regulated, and so to penetrate this market, you have to be ready to invest a lot of efforts. But if you manage to penetrate it, then of course your efforts they pay off. Because it's also one of the biggest world markets. The US accounts for a quarter of global consumption, and very often the American consumers, they're the ones who really start with new products, try to integrate the new products in their market. So definitely it's worth making an effort to try to enter this market. The US, as we all know pretty well, leads the world in investment in research and experimental development. US has the best universities, accelerators, venture capital ecosystem. So they have it all, and that's why they are ahead of others very often in terms of innovation and in terms of putting new products on the market, inventing new things. But this is also why, also because of this innovative spirit here in the United States, it's important to be here and to try to scale up here and to be first to learn about those trends that are happening here. Of course, we all have heard and witnessed and probably have been impacted by tariffs. This has been a big deal here on this side of the Atlantic, but again, it affected other parts of the world, including Europe. It's a new factor in the transatlantic trade. And of course, in the beginning, it was a little unsettling, but once we got this clarity about the 15%, I think the recent data shows that we see a rebound in trade between EU and United States. In September, EU exports to US surged by 60%. So reflecting this new momentum after the agreement on tariffs has been reached. But again, the tariffs, it's a dynamic topic as well, because we also have noticed, probably you as well, because you represent this sector, that there were some exemptions that were offered to many agricultural products from United States on tariffs. Exemptions from tariffs, I mean, not necessarily, and not only maybe to Europe, but also to other agricultural products coming from other parts of the world, from Brazil, South America, because just here in the United States they need those products, and so of course they make exemptions and allow easier access of those products to the US market. So this is the context, like kind of macroeconomic context where we are here in the United States with economic trends. And I was speaking specifically of how to penetrate this market, how to be present here. I think we have, speaking from the Lithuanian perspective, we have very good premises for that, because the exports of agricultural and food products from Lithuania to United States are quite stable and have been stable over the past 3-4 years, totaling around 80 to 90 million annually, which is a decent, to say the least, figure for a country of our size. But to achieve a more meaningful breakthrough in the US market, I think there are no miracles, but there is a number of practical steps that you could take. But again, when I say no miracles, then it also implies that basically you know the answer to this question. I think one of the very simple ways how to try to penetrate this market is to simply come and be here, attend exhibitions, just as simple as that. We have those from pavilions that we organize in some of those exhibitions, and each year approximately 13,000 industrial exhibitions take place across the United States. And of course, we have this list, and Mindaugas and others will share it with you. Lithuania already participates in some of those events, such as Bio Convention, Photonics West, the Natural Product Expo West. So as you see, not always in the agri sector, but also in other sectors. So, and we give the same advice to all, sectors of Lithuanian businesses. It's not something exclusive that I'm saying you. We're saying the same to others. Because you just have to be present. You have to pitch yourself. You have to try to come up with some stand, or maybe pull team up. And of course, Litfood is there in Lithuania to help you. There is also innovation agency, other institutions that can really help to and take responsibility for those national stands. But we would very much encourage the kind of bottom-up approach, that you come to those agencies and you say that I want to be there, I want to be present in one of those exhibitions, and let's see what can we do together, maybe with some other fellow participants of business community, agribusiness community. So that's one advice, just to be present in those exhibitions. Then, of course, we have some also events that we organize ourselves here at the embassy, and together with other Lithuanian missions. We have 3 consulate generals across the United States: LA, Chicago, and New York, besides the embassy here in Washington, D.C. And every year we also organize this major business event, which we call the American-Lithuanian Business Forum. It's an annual event. The last one took place in Boston, I believe. I was still in Lithuania, so next year will be my first. So let's go together to that first business event, major Lithuanian business event, which will take place on April 27, 29 in LA, in Los Angeles. And by the way, now we work on the program and the topics that we are going to address in that forum. And I see that food and beverage industry will be one of the focus areas of the forum. So again, very welcome. Please join. We have already begun preparing the program, and we'll make sure that those who come, they will have a very useful experience. Then, speaking of how we feature here in this market, of course, you probably know that Lithuania currently holds permits to export meat, dairy, fishery, and egg products to the United States. The approval process for wheat exports is in final stage, and the initial steps have already been taken to obtain certificates for the exports of poultry meat. Poultry, very popular in the United States. So if we manage to get those permits, I think this will open many doors to Lithuanian exporters. Then, of course, I think it's important just to stay in touch through webinars like this, like what we have today. And of course, the professional legal guidance is essential when planning to expand your business abroad. So therefore, I'm very actually pleased that Mr. Ivars Slokenbergs, who runs his own law firm in New York, has agreed to share insights and advice on the key legal and practical challenges foreign companies face in the US market. So you have a lot of experience in managing business and how to enter into contractual relationships, so and intellectual property protection issues. So and taxation nuances. So there are a lot of aspects that you can share, and we are very glad that you agreed to join us. I think all this audience will be all ears, listening very carefully and attentively to what you are going to say. So we are very glad that you join. You yourself have a Latvian origin, as I mentioned in my introduction. So you know the Baltic market, the Baltic companies, and you know how they enter the US market, what are specific maybe issues that they face when they enter this market. And for more than a decade, you also served as a corporate attorney at one of the leading pan-Baltic law firms, Alex, well known in Lithuania. So you understand Lithuanian business ecosystem as well. So once again, thank you very much for joining. And I hope with this very general introduction, I warmed the waters a little bit, broke the ice. And thank you also to my colleague Mindaugas, who is here, who is the one who is behind this event, and colleagues from Litfood. Let's do more of these. Again, please come more often. Please join those exhibits and the events that we organize at the level of the diplomatic representations. And let's just be in touch. And I can assure you, we already find Lithuanian products in the some US supermarkets, which is for a diplomat. When I come into a market and I see a Lithuanian product, in one of the stalls, I mean, this is always, those moments are very rewarding. So I want to have more of these moments. So let's work together to make sure that we can enjoy these. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for a warming up introductory speech. And now let me invite our next honored speaker, as Ambassador mentioned, Mr. Ivar Slockenbergs, the founder of Slockenbergs PLLC, a New York-based law firm and consultancy specializing in advising Baltic companies entering the U.S. market.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
welcome.
You can hear me. Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Good afternoon to everyone in Lithuania. Good morning to everyone in Washington. Thank you, Ambassador Varbuolis, for this introduction. You have provided key points for a 10-hour lecture, at least, but we have maybe 90 minutes. Thank you also, Mindaugas, for bringing us together today. Thank you, Litfood, and Irma, Ms. Slaišionaitė Černiauskaitė. I hope I've pronounced it.
Thank you.
Very well. Yes, so the ambassador really has keyed up a lot of topics, very complex matters. So let me just share my presentation. We can start with that. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Perfect. So yes, you're a Lithuanian food and beverage companies. The ambassador has already outlined all the challenges of entering this very large and complex market. Your priorities, of course, are to identify markets, identify clients, distributors. That's a very big challenge. But also you cannot forget about legal and tax. And in the very limited time we have today, don't expect for me to opine on tariffs and import procedures. We're just going to touch on some very general legal issues that you need to think about. So when you are entering the market, or maybe perhaps you're already in that process, just that you have some things in mind that you need to think about. Just to move ahead. So I was already introduced very quickly again. I am familiar with Lithuania through my Latvian connection. As the ambassador mentioned, I did spend 10 years in Riga working in M&A and corporate for Alex. During that time, had opportunity to work on various pan-Baltic projects, was often in Vilnius in Lithuania. Even today, I try to get to Vilnius at least once a year. Now I see I have to be in LA at the end of April as well for this great event. And prior to coming to Latvia at Alex, I was at a large New York law firm for some time. I started my career as a diplomat at the UN here in New York for Latvia at the UN mission. And about 7 years ago, I returned to New York and started my own practice, focusing on the Baltic market. My clients are mostly Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, but also Poland, other neighboring countries. My clients are technology startups, but also investors in companies and also established manufacturing companies, including some food and beverage companies in Latvia, although that's not my focus. But let's move ahead. Oh, we have a pretty picture from Vilnius, of course, for you this morning or this afternoon. First off, I'm going to speak quickly just because we have a lot to cover. This is not legal advice. This is not tax advice. This is very general information for you to consider. So please do not consider it legal advice. So here's an approximate agenda. I'm going to touch on some aspects of the legal system and options of doing business in the USA. establishing a legal entity, some words about commercial contracts, maybe a little e-commerce, IP protection, employment, equity compensation, U.S. taxation, product liability, immigration, and some aspects of regulatory. Now, these are just some topics that I chose that may be interesting, not just to food and beverage companies, but as a general things that you should be aware of when entering the U.S. market or thinking about entry into the U.S. market. And just let's move ahead. So first, you have to understand that the U.S. legal environment is very different. That's one thing I want to impress upon you today is that not to expect that what you're used to in Lithuania or even in Europe, as far as legal environment, a legal system, is what you're going to encounter in the USA. It's very different. We have our federal system, which means various levels of lawmaking. We have the federal, national level. We have the state level and also a local level. Well, just like in any country, we've got the three branches of government, legislative, executive, and judicial. But what's important in the USA, you've got all these, this is at the federal level, but this system of separate legislatures and separate executives and separate judicial systems and courts is recreated across the 50 states. And this is what creates the complexity. It's already a complex market as far as geographically, regionally, very large market by population, different regions. But on top of that, you've got this very complex legal system of a federal system of laws and separately 50 separate state systems of laws and 50 separate court systems. And even some of the largest cities have their own courts and legislatures as well. What's important to note is that much of business regulation is regulated at the state level. So corporate matters, contracts, employment, much of that is going to be state law. But overlying, you've got all the whole body of federal law and federal regulations as well. That has to be taken account of. So if you are exporting or planning to export from Lithuania or operating in the US market, you of course are envisioning to be operating nationally or selling nationally as much as possible. And this means you have to be potentially in compliance with 51 legal systems, the federal system and the 50 states. And this is part of the challenge. Also, we are a common law country, as opposed to Lithuania and Latvia, which are civil law countries. Much of your legislation is embedded in codes, in the civil code, the civil code of Lithuania in particular, while the U.S. is a common law system where much of the law is created by judges over the last 150 to 200 years, judicial decisions, which are, there's no one textbook that tells you the law. Contract law has been created over the course of 150 years by series of judicial precedents, and it's something that that is complex to find, and you need lawyers to help you determine what that lawmaking is. But just be aware of this difference in legal systems as well. So let's move ahead. You are already operating in the U.S. market, or you're thinking about it. There's various ways of entering the U.S. market. You can easily stay in Lithuania and export directly to the U.S. If you can find customers, or these days also you can sell via online platforms. You can stay in Lithuania and engage a U.S. distributor of your products or sales agents, or you can establish a U.S. entity. Again, there are various sales channels, B2B, again, selling directly from Lithuania or to consumers, engaging wholesalers, distributors, retailers, sales agents, representatives that may be representing you and signing contracts for you, or maybe just finding business for you. There's all kinds of ways of doing it. But at some point, you may decide that you need to be here. You need to have a presence here because, as the ambassador mentioned, it's a very complex market, and you do have to be here. You have to, as the ambassador said, it's not enough to sit in Riga or Vilnius and expect customers to come to you. You have to go to those trade shows that the ambassador mentioned. And you've got to, it's not just once, you have to come repeatedly, establish relationships. Just like in Lithuania and Vilnius, it's all about relationships. It's even more so important in the US. You've got to be here and establish trust. And that's the only way you're going to build business. So, okay, so let's go beyond that situation where you're just exporting from Lithuania and you actually are ready to establish an entity. Well, there's various reasons why you may need that entity. First of all, if you're going to employ anyone, you need a legal entity. If you're going to have an office or a warehouse, you need a legal entity. Sometimes you may have a U.S. investor that requires you to establish a U.S. entity. Sometimes it's just a matter of having a U.S. business, a U.S. address, because we Americans are quite provincial and we like to do business, or more comfortable doing business with a U.S. company rather than with the strange UAB thing that no one understands in the U.S. Or just to have a U.S. bank account, you need a U.S. entity, or for tax reasons, or compliance with your customer contracts. So there's many reasons to have that. We have a whole complex series of acronyms for companies. We're not going to go through that today. I would suggest just to focus on, if you're going to establish a legal entity, it's going to be either a C corporation or an LLC. So what is a C corporation? A C corporation is your traditional limited liability entity, which has shareholders, a board of directors, and officers. I wouldn't quite compare it exactly to a Lithuanian UAB. The supervisory board that's maybe between the shareholders and the managers is not quite the same thing as the board of directors. The board of directors in the US is much more powerful, much more has control of the business. So be careful about that. The main thing here is tax. And this is actually very familiar to you as well. A C corporation has double taxation, just like a Lithuanian UAB. The corporate profits will be taxed. And then secondly, if there are dividends to distribute, then you'll be paying, the shareholders will be paying tax on those dividends as well. Typical legal structure. And profits, but you don't have to pay dividends. You can retain those and reinvest them. I mentioned tax because this is the key difference with an LLC. So this is a U.S. LLC, but please do not confuse a U.S. LLC with something that's called probably a UAB in Lithuania is called a private limited liability company. So I just want to make the point that a LLC, as you understand it in Lithuania, is nothing like a U.S. LLC. A U.S. LLC is a totally different animal than a corporation or the typical company in Lithuania. LLCs in the U.S. have only been around for about 40 years. Basically, it's a partnership that gives limited liability. And the key here again is tax. The LLC in the U.S. is actually not a taxable entity. It's not taxed at all. It's a flow-through entity. It's a pass-through entity. What does that mean? It means that profits and losses flow through the entity and taxed at the ownership level. So the LLC is not owned by shareholders. It's owned by memberships. You don't own shares. You own membership interests, and the members are taxed on the either profits or the losses that flow through this LLC. That's a very important distinction to remember. Some more distinctions between the C Corp and LLC. The C Corp, it's called a C Corp because that refers to Chapter C of the U.S. tax law. That's why it's called a C Corp. So again, C Corp, you can retain earnings, not pay out dividends, whereas in an LLC, if you see on the right side here, you cannot, and there's always exceptions, but in the typical case, you cannot retain earnings as profits and losses are passed through to the members, the owners, each year that they are earned and taxed. Okay. Again, C corporation on the left, double taxation, which may or may not be relevant. Whereas in LLC, it's just a single level taxation. Just the members are taxed. Okay, let's go on. The C corporation, again, is a traditional corporate structure offering various classes of stock option plans, etc. Ease of selling stock in M&A process, shares, are sold in M&A or share transactions. LLC is a different animal. Again, LLC is more of a creation of contracts. There's a law underlying it, but it's actually a contractual arrangement and an operating agreement amongst you and the other members. It's much more difficult to sell interests in an LLC. You have to amend the agreement. But it's also sometimes much more flexible as far as how you distribute profits and earnings amongst the members. But the key thing, again, is the difference in tax and how the entity is taxed. Many companies cannot be LLCs. For example, many of my clients are technology startups, and because of the way it's taxed, the venture capital investors or other institutional investors, the LLC tax model does not apply to them. The other thing to remember about an LLC is while in a corporation, you as a shareholder may be receiving dividends income in Lithuania, and those dividends may be subject to withholding tax. When you're a member of an LLC, you're actually could be becoming a direct taxpayer in the U.S. because as I said, the LLC members are taxed directly, and so as an LLC member in Lithuania, you may open yourself up to U.S. taxation, which may or may not be for you. But so these are going to be your basic choices between C corporation and an LLC. I cannot tell you which one you should be. It's something you should discuss with your tax advisor. But they have different. Each one has its advantages and disadvantages and different tax treatment. So enough about that. So okay, let's move forward. So you're ready to incorporate. Again, as I said, the corporate law is based on state law. We have 50 different states. So if you are going to incorporate, you're going to have to choose one state in which to incorporate. This will depend on various factors. I would say if you're doing business in only one state, if you're going to open up a restaurant in Kansas or a factory in Florida, you would probably incorporate in that one state. But that's not going to be the case for you. You'll be operating, or you hope to be operating on a national level. So then it becomes, there's lots of different choices. You have to compare state income taxes, franchise taxes, incorporation expenses. Those are probably fairly similar. Many companies choose to incorporate in Delaware. I'll tell you why. First off, it's a very popular state, both for very large multinational corporations and also many small companies, startups. It's a very flexible, business-friendly state, very flexible in corporate governance, structuring equity, non-bureaucratic. The main thing that large companies like is that it's very predictable, reliable. The courts are very progressive as far as keeping up with the latest in corporate trends, and the courts are very expert in resolving corporate disputes. And this is very attractive for large companies. Well, Elon Musk didn't like it because one of the courts in the last year ruled against him on his compensation in one of these companies, and he actually pulled out of Delaware and he reincorporated in Texas, I believe. But the trend is still that Delaware remains a very popular state for various reasons. I'm not advocating that you do incorporate Delaware, but it's a very serious option. But for, say, technology startups, many companies are, Delaware is often the default state, only because investors know all the investment documentation for many institutional investors is Delaware law based. Everyone knows Delaware law. All the documents are Delaware law, so it's just the default. That's where you incorporate if you're a technology startup. It may not be necessarily the same case for a food and beverage company from Lithuania, but it's something to consider. Incorporation procedure is somewhat similar to Lithuania, but also very different. I think one thing that you should understand in Lithuania and Latvia, we have a company register. You submit documents. You have to file your incorporation documents there, and you have to name your shareholders publicly, and who is your management board, and who has signature rights. None of that applies to the US. Yes, you have to submit your incorporation certificate to a state institution, but everything else is private. It's all internal. How you, who owns your shares, who is in your board of directors, who are your officers, that's all documented internally. And you'll have an internal officer called the secretary who maintains that. That's a significant difference where there's much more privacy, but much more responsibility in a U.S. company to maintain this corporate governance. You'll also, after incorporating, have appoint a registered agent whose sole role is that if the state wants to deliver a tax notice to you, or if someone wants to sue you in court, they'll know where to find you. If I would be incorporating a company, I would be the incorporator. I would submit the documents. I would appoint the initial board and adopt the initial bylaws, and then hand it off to your board to issue stock and to organize the company. How am I doing on time? I'm talking quickly. I hope I can be understood, but there's a lot to cover here. So, and practical follow-ups are, it's very easy to incorporate, probably the same as in Lithuania. Basically, in a day, it's all about getting your documents together. But you could go into an incorporation service tonight on the internet and incorporate a company in Delaware tomorrow. But it's all about, I wouldn't always advocate that. You need to make sure your equity is structured properly, your governance is structured properly. But it's fairly simple procedure, appointing a registered agent. In addition to your, one of the first key things you have to do is apply for your EIN number. It's an employer identification number. It's your tax ID number, which you need to open a bank account, which you need to employ people, which you need everywhere. So but the U.S. is a large and bureaucratic country. It's very modern, but also ancient in some respects. If most U.S. Taxpayers can go online and get an EIN number online in a few minutes, but if you're a foreigner in Lithuania and you don't have a U.S. tax ID number yourself, you actually have to use a fax machine. I still have a fax machine, and to apply for an EIN number, and wait 2 weeks to receive it. And during the government shutdown, it took many weeks. And during COVID, don't get me started, it took sometimes 3 or 4 months to get a EIN number. But we deal with these things. You also need a physical address. Even though you can operate the company from Lithuania, you'll need a physical address for your bank, for the tax authorities, and of course, opening a bank account. Not an easy thing. Just like for foreigners in Lithuania, there's lots of AML concerns. The same thing as in the US. If you're a foreign-owned company, there will be some pushback, or many banks just refuse to deal with foreign-owned companies because they don't want to deal with the AML risk. But there are some that do. You will need a tax advisor, an accountant, office space. Not necessarily, as I said, you don't have to be a citizen, you don't have to be a resident to open up a company in the US. You can operate everything from your board of the directors. All your officers can sit in Lithuania and manage the company from there. So it's not necessary to have a physical space here, but you do need those addresses that I mentioned. Also, something to recognize, when you incorporate, that's just your home state of registration. You can obviously operate across the world and across the US from that. But every state will want a piece of your pie if you're going to be doing this business nationally. So you have to remember that even though you're incorporated, say in Delaware, if you have an office in New York, New York is going to want a piece of your action, and they're going to require you to register to get a license to transact business in New York. Or if you have a salesperson in, I don't know, Florida, and you're employing someone there, you're also going to have to get a license to transact business in Florida, pay them an annual fee, most likely also file income taxes in those states. But each state has a very different, again, this is the complexity of this legal system. Each state has different rules on what it means to be doing business. If you have the same sort of transaction over and over again in one state with a particular client, say in Chicago, that may imply that you are doing business in Illinois, and you may have to also get a license to do business there. So this can get complex, and failure to comply may mean penalties, or in the future, for example, if you have a dispute with someone in the state of Georgia and you sue them in Georgia court, and it turns out you haven't obtained your license to do business, your lawsuit may be thrown out of court because you haven't complied with that law. So just something to consider as well. Corporate record keeping, as I said, we don't have a company register here in the U.S. You have to keep all the documents internally for good corporate governance. If someone ever buys your company, they're going to do due diligence. They're going to want to see that you've kept all your documents properly, and you don't have no problems with liability in terms of someone in a dispute trying to pierce your corporate veil, as they say, pierce your limited liability because you haven't acted as a corporation. You have not kept separately the operations of the company from your personal business. So just keep in mind that good corporate governance goes a long way in the U.S. Let's move on. I think I've said enough about how we're doing on time. 9:15 here in New York. Let's talk a bit about commercial contracting. Again, it's different than the U.S. than Lithuania. Contracts are a creature mostly of state law and of common law. As I said, hundreds or thousands of court decisions over the last 150 years have created separate contract laws in each of the states. Lots of things are very similar, but I think in Lithuania you've got the Lithuanian Civil Code, which actually lays out a lot of contract law. It's not so simple in the U.S. We have something in most states called the Four Corners Doctrine, which means that the courts will not look beyond the four corners of your contracts to interpret its meaning if there's a dispute. So this means that contracts in the U.S. will be longer than they may be in Lithuania and other European countries, simply because you have to document your entire intentions and understandings between the parties. Because if there is a dispute, the court will look at what they have on paper. So you have to make sure that you have this everything properly documented. It's not maybe like in Lithuania where you can refer to certain clauses of the Civil Code to determine the meaning of your contract. Although there is something that's called the Uniform Commercial Code, which is adopted in all the states, that does imply certain commercial terms for merchants in certain transactions. If you are doing business cross-border, you may be familiar with the UN Convention for the International Sale of Goods, the CISG, which the US and Lithuania are both parties to. So in a cross-border contract for the international sale of goods, food and beverage, the CISG will apply unless you specifically exclude it. So if you don't like the convention, you have to make sure your contract specifically excludes application of the CISG. Okay. There's also something in the US called equity, where a judge in a dispute will not just look at the agreement between the parties, but look at certain equitable principles, justice and fairness, public policy. I won't go more into detail on that just to save time. But I think one of the key takeaways is not to rely on oral agreements, understandings. I've seen it many times with my clients where you have a handshake agreement or an understanding with some partner, which is all fine, but in a year or two later, when the parties are in a dispute and there's no agreement, nothing on paper, that's where you get into trouble. So just be aware of that. That's always good to retain lawyer to put everything on paper, because you have to plan for the future. Even though you have good relationships with someone now, with a distributor or a wholesaler or a manufacturing partner, when that relationship sours, then it's good to have your understanding on paper. So that's a very important lesson that many of my clients have learned in the past. Key terms probably very similar as in Lithuania: termination clauses, automatic renewal clauses. In distribution agreements, especially, you have to craft your exclusivity or non-exclusivity, territory issues very carefully, how payments are made, penalties, choice of law, very important, and choice of forum. I imagine you're familiar with this as well in Europe as well. If you're going to be doing business with the U.S., it's always going to be a negotiation with your contract parties. Choice of law may not seem very important, but when you do get into a dispute with your partner in California and you've agreed to California law and dispute resolution in some small court in a hometown in the other party's hometown in California, you're going to be stuck resolving that dispute and having very, very expensive lawyers in California battling out your dispute on their home turf. On the other hand, will your contract partner in California accept arbitration in the Vilnius Court of International Arbitration? That's something to negotiate. Maybe it's going to be arbitration in New York. But you have to think about in any contract, just like you do today in Lithuania, is how are you going to resolve disputes, and in what form, and who's going to have the advantage is going to be up to the negotiation strength of the parties. Just like this is not unique to the U.S. Something also called the battle of the forms is important. If you're going to be putting out a proposal for sale of your goods to the U.S., you may very well attach to your proposal a whole long list of terms and conditions. And when your contract partner sends back a purchase order, they may attach a whole list of their terms and conditions. And this is the battle of the forms. Whose terms and conditions will apply? Because very often they may be in conflict. And when you do get into a dispute, there's an orderly way or there's ways of ensuring which rules will actually apply, but it's something to remember, to consider. Okay, e-commerce, I won't say much about it to save time. Of course, we're all living in a digital age, and you are going to be doing possibly e-commerce as well. Many different aspects to consider as well regarding privacy. Well, you all know about GDPR. We don't have, and I have not included data protection in today's presentation. Data protection is not as protected, as important in the U.S. as it is in Europe. And maybe the main point is that there is no uniform data protection regulation or in the U.S. There are some federal rules, but there's also state by state. And some states are more strict than others. For example, California. California is highly regulated in many aspects, not just here, but in employment and otherwise. So be careful about doing business in California. But my point is that if you have customers in California, you're going to have to also comply with the online privacy laws of California, or else face fines by California regulators. But those same rules will not apply to New York or to Florida. I think I've said enough about e-commerce for today. So let's move on to IP. So intellectual property is, for most cases, certainly for technology startups, but also for food and beverage companies, is a large part, or could be, or should be a large part of, or significant part of your assets, and should be properly protected. You're likely doing that already in Lithuania, but it's also important in U.S. Perspective. There are some differences in U.S. IP law that you should, and also, again, if I'm not sure what your strategy is, if you have a U.S. company that you intend to sell at some point, then in any sales process, M&A process, a due diligence process, IP review will be very important. So you want to make sure you're protecting your IP from day one. And we're talking about patents, copyright, trademark, and trade secrets. I won't say much about it. Let's just flag some key issues. For patents, which may not be so relevant in the food and beverage space, but in the U.S. you get 20 years exclusive monopoly. What's key about the U.S. is we are a first to file jurisdiction rather than a first to invent. What does that mean? If two people invent the same thing at the same time, it's the first person that races to the patent office and files is who gets the rights to that patent. Also be careful about public disclosures. If you are disclosing your invention publicly, you better file your application in the patent office within 12 months or risk losing the invention. Okay, I won't say anything more. Copyright, again, is different than patents, same as in Lithuania. It's you get protection for your expression of a particular idea, for artwork, or for a book. But the general point that I'll make is to, and I hope you've done this already with all your team in Lithuania and in the US, is that everyone that's working for you should have, as part of their employment agreement or their engagement, certainly should be signing some kind of assignment of all the IP that is produced as an employee or as a consultant. This will save you lots of headaches in the future as far as identifying or securing the ownership of your IP. Trade secrets. This is more important maybe to the food and beverage space. Trade secrets is simply your, and I'm not sure how much trade secrets are regulated in Lithuania. Certainly they are in the US. Again, a creature of state law, but also of federal law. And trade secrets are simply your confidential information that gives you some competitive advantage. The most famous trade secret in the US is the secret formula for Coca-Cola, which sits in a vault in Atlanta, Georgia. The compounds, devices, all your data, your customer data, pricing, this is all your, these are all your trade secrets. And the only thing that protects you cannot register it. The only thing that protects trade secrets is confidentiality. You got to make sure to keep it secret, because once it becomes public or not confidential, it loses its value and you can't protect it anymore. So you have to be very careful that you protect it with all your team, but also your cooperation partners. That means confidentiality agreements, non-disclosure agreements. Be very careful about how you disclose and to whom you disclose, because once it's out, once it's no longer confidential, you lose the protection. But if someone does steal, unlawfully take your trade secrets, under US law, you do have a cause of action for damages under US state law and also federal law. Trademarks are also a form of IP, which are very important for your sector, for food and beverage. These are, of course, protect your logos, your symbols, your brand, what identifies your products, what distinguishes your products and your brand in the market. I'll just say 2 points, because you already are familiar with trademark law, likely in Europe and in Lithuania. First off is that you have to make sure that you protect it. If you do already have trademark protection in Europe, in a European trademark, you can actually transfer. There's a process of transferring that to the USPTO, the US Patent and Trademark Office. Trademarks are geographically geographic rights. So just because you have trademark rights in Europe or Lithuania doesn't mean it's automatically protected in US. You actually have to transfer your European trademark application or the registered trademark to the US Trademark Office and register it, or you can just submit a brand new application in the USPTO. If you submit your existing trademark application from Europe, you're going to be, whatever limitations are put on that in the European context will also apply in the US. But in the US, they will, even if you have a trademark in the US, the US trademark examiners will look at it de novo. They will compare it to other trademarks in the US. And this is maybe a key point, that before you start doing business in the US, make sure that you've actually maybe done a trademark review, because there are already millions of trademarks registered in the US or applied for in the US. And you don't want to start marketing your products in the US and find out only later that the trademark or the brand that you've selected is being used by someone else, or already registered by someone else, and you can get into a dispute, or they could sue you for trademark infringement. So it's very important to do this analysis up front. And also start early. The US Trademark Office is very busy. If you submitted a trademark application today, you wouldn't even get your first response for 8 months or 9 months. So it's at least 8, 9, 10, maybe a year to register. And if you apply, you get the protection right away. You know, if ultimately the trademark is issued, it'll be protected right away from the date of application. But you will have this period of time, could be 8 months or 15 months until it's registered. And you know, sometimes if you're doing business in online platforms like eBay or Amazon, and someone, you know, a Chinese competitor tries to sell gray market goods or imitation goods using your trademark, you won't be able to get them off those platforms if you can't show eBay or Amazon that you have a registered trademark. So it's very important to have these things done up front so that you can protect yourself from such unlawful competition. Just to finish about IP, again, when you're entering the US market, be clear on what is the IP you own, and what you'll be transferring, what you'll be licensing. Make sure your entire team, your employees, your consultants are all aligned on protecting your IP. You have the right agreements in place. Data protection, cybersecurity, monitor what your employees are doing. I don't want to be paranoid, but these are very, if IP is a great part of your value, you have to be protecting it. Okay, enough about IP. How are we doing on time? It's 9:28 in New York. So let's move on to employment. Again, something that's in the US is state regulated, state by state, but also has federal dimensions as well. And there are key differences. At least I'm sure Lithuania is similar to Latvia, where employment is very employee friendly. It's very hard to fire people. Lots of protections for employees. Maybe it's different now in Lithuania and Latvia. We're trying to move away from that because it's what makes the U.S. so dynamic an economy is this flexibility in employment. We call it at-will employment. That means it's easy to hire, easy to fire. So if your business is booming, you can hire a lot of people, and then when business drops or where there's a recession, you can very easily fire everybody. It sounds brutal, but that gives business lots of flexibility. And this is one of the key differences between Europe and the United States. Employment agreements are different in the U.S. I mean, in Lithuania, probably similar to Latvia, you've got these very long and complex employment agreements. In the U.S., it's less formal. You may have employment agreements with your senior management on their compensation and on termination and on performance and everything else. But with your normal average employees, you'll have an employment letter where you offer them employment. You will state their salary, their benefits. You'll state that this is at-will employment, which means they know that they can be hired, or they can be fired at any time, terminated at any time. At the same time, they can also leave at any time. It's in a competitive environment where there's low unemployment, your employees, your team can leave at any time and go to a competitor. That's the reality of doing business here. One thing to note, and I think this is probably the same case in Lithuania, independent contractors versus employees. You may have to make sure you classify a person as an employee if they are an employee. Simply calling someone an independent contractor and not withholding taxes and not giving them employment benefits under the law, you will get into trouble. If you've hired someone that should be an employee, meaning someone that you control their work, their time. There's many different definitions in each state of what constitutes an employee. But once you do have an employee, you have to give them employment benefits, you have to withhold taxes and so forth. And the way you get into trouble here is that if you hired someone as an independent contractor where they should be an employee, and I believe that this is also the case in Lithuania, you will be hit with fines from the tax authority. And even worse, if you get into trouble and into a dispute with this person and you fire them, they may come back with a lawsuit at you and saying, hey, you engaged me as an independent contractor. I was under law actually an employee. You owe me all these back wages, overtime. You owe me taxes, money, benefits, and I'm going to report you to the state authorities. And I have seen this. This happens when you get into a dispute with a person. There's all kinds of problems can arise if you have not been in compliance with HR and HR compliance. And here again is the complexity of the U.S. market. If you're going to be hiring, salespeople around the country, one in New York, you're going to have to be in compliance with New York employment law. If you've got someone in California, you have to be also in compliance with California employment law, and so forth. This is expensive. This is complex, but that's the reality that we have. Again, employment is regulated mostly at the state level, but there's lots of federal law, discrimination laws, race, sex, age, disability, etc., sexual harassment, equal pay, minimum wages, labor safety regulations. You got this complex web of state employment law, and overlying it is you've got all these federal regulations as well that you have to comply with. So just be careful about that. Equity compensation, I won't say too much about that. In addition to paying salaries, there's all kinds of equity compensation plans, stock options, restricted stock, phantom stock, stock appreciation rights. May not be so relevant to the food and beverage space as it is to, say, technology startups. So I won't go into it. But again, there's lots of different ways to compensate your team in the U.S. But these are also very complex. They're very complex from tax perspective, from securities law compliance. So again, whenever you get into any of these things, you are going to need professional advisors to help you sort them out. Let's go on. Okay, tax. I'm not a tax advisor. I'm not a tax specialist. I don't pretend to give tax advice at all. But it's something that you have to be aware of, just like you do in Lithuania. But I will say a few things that you should keep in mind. First off, the tax system has been overhauled. Actually, the first Trump administration in 2017, there was a major tax reform to make the U.S. more competitive internationally. The corporate income tax was reduced significantly. It was, the corporate income tax was at about 35%, and the tax reform of 2017 reduced it to 21%, starting in 2018. And I'm making this point because this was because of the political compromises that were made back then. These tax cuts were set to expire this year. And likely if there had been a Democratic president, then that rate would have been increased. But with Trump's reelection and the budget that was adopted in July, the big, beautiful bill, those tax cuts are now permanent. So we now have a permanent 21% corporate income tax rate in the U.S. But remember that if you're doing business in other states, if you have an economic nexus with other states, you'll also be paying taxes in whatever states you're operating in. So you'll also be paying income tax in states. Some states have 0% income tax. Others have up to, I think New Jersey has like 11%. I've seen statistics that the combined average U.S. federal and state income tax is somewhere between 25 and 38%. But again, you have to speak to your tax advisor to structure your business and your tax presence in the U.S. Obviously, if a U.S. company that's resident in the U.S., you'll be paying federal tax, but also non-USA persons. If you're doing business from Lithuania, non-USA persons engaged in a USA trade or business from which you derive income connected to the U.S., you may be subject to federal tax. Short-term capital gains are taxed the same as ordinary income, but there's lower rates for long-term. But we're not going to go into details of tax too much. Corporate withholding taxes that you should be aware of if you are a foreign company, and again, you have a C corporation and you're earning dividends. So when those dividends come, or you want to pay yourself dividends in Lithuania, that's going to be subject to withholding tax. The same goes with interest or a royalty income. But the good thing, and the general rate, the withholding tax is 30%. But most countries have a tax treaty, including Lithuania. So under the USA-Lithuania tax treaty, there are special rates, negotiated rates. So, for example, on dividends, the withholding tax could be as low as 5% or 15%. On interest, 0 or 10%, and on royalties could be 5% or 10%. But those are just some examples that there are benefits under the USA-Lithuania tax treaty that you should be aware of. Other federal taxes, of course, if you're in the alcoholic beverage space, there's going to be excise taxes, customs duties and imports. Don't get me started. I'm not an import duty specialist or tariffs. I know the ambassador mentioned them. Very complex subjects, which I will not opine on. You may probably know more than I do if you're already importing goods into the U.S. But there's a whole group of taxes that you have to be concerned about. If you're employing people, obviously payroll taxes, individual income taxes, FICA, which is federal insurance contributions, unemployment tax, and state taxes. And if you're an individual, obviously, if you're a U.S. citizen or a resident alien, if you have the right to work in the U.S., you'll be taxed on your global income. If you're non-resident alien, so if you're, but you are, non-resident alien, meaning you're a Lithuanian and you're not a resident in the U.S., you will be taxed on U.S. source income. For example, if you're getting dividends and so forth. I don't want to say too much about tax, but again, it's also a complex system of federal, state, and local. There are about 4,000 taxing jurisdictions in the U.S., and as the ambassador said, it's a very large and complex market, but also compliance can be quite stressful, and especially if you're a U.S. company with foreign shareholders, there are special rules, special filings that you make, and if you fail to make those filings, there can be significant penalties, $25,000 if you fail to file a particular form. I forgot which form it is, but my point is that after you incorporate, make sure you get a tax advisor that's going to be filing your, make sure you stay compliant with U.S. tax laws and not to get into trouble. Okay, how are we doing on time? It's 9:40.
Perfect in time.
Okay. So let's switch now to product liability, which is something that's relevant also for you as manufacturers of goods that may injure persons or hopefully not cause death. But we have a whole body of law, again, mostly regulated at the state level, called product liability law, which is the legal responsibility of manufacturers and distributors and sellers for injuries or damages caused by defective products. And there are various theories of liability. There's negligence, which is probably have something similar in Lithuania, a breach of warranty. If you've by contract provided some warranty on the quality of your goods, or strict liability, which I'm not sure you have in Lithuania, but it's certainly a very important concept in the United States. So negligence, of course, is based on that you've breached some standard of care that a reasonable person should have exercised. For example, in how you design your goods, how you manufacture them, how you put your labels on them, and so forth. And if you've breached the standard of care, you may be found by a court to be liable. Okay. Now, strict liability is something different. Strict liability for products liability does not care whether you've been negligent or not. It doesn't care whether you're the person that's actually sold the good. Strict liability focuses on the actual defects in the products. And it's a public policy of the U.S. Already for 100 years that the courts have created these strict liability theories of liability so that injured people, injured consumers can get relief and compensation for dangerous products. And that means that it doesn't matter if you're a Lithuanian, if you're, I don't know, manufacturing cheese in Lithuania, and you sell that cheese to a distributor in I don't know, California, and that distributor sells it to a supermarket, and then that supermarket sells it to a consumer in California, and the consumer is injured or poisoned, hopefully not poisoned, but injured by your product, then they will sue they could sue the whole chain of parties. They could sue the supermarket and the distributor, and if they can reach you in court, they'll also sue you, the manufacturer, in Lithuania. And it's up, the courts leave it to this whole chain of parties to allocate responsibility for who actually is responsible. But it's something you have to understand, that these policies do exist, and they're state by state. And the plaintiffs' counsel, the lawyers in the U.S. will, if you're doing business nationally and you're selling this horrible products nationally, they will choose the court in the state that has the most favorable laws for getting compensation against you. So you may be faced with if you're selling your product nationally, a lawsuit in Texas, because the laws in Texas give a more favorable interpretation of strict liability, and or more chance of recovery against you. So that, unfortunately, is the case. I know I'll get questions about litigation in the U.S. Yes, we are more litigious in the U.S. than Lithuania and other European countries, but there are ways of dealing with that. So your product defect claims will come, again, in three different categories: in the defect in the design of the product, defect in the manufacturing of the product, or defect in your warnings or instructions. For example, in the food and beverage context, a design defect may be a flaw in your product recipe or in processing. A manufacturing defect could be due to manufacturing problems, some contamination of the food with pathogens, or simply a defect in your warnings, that you've provided improper labeling, improper warnings or instructions, or in your packaging. You've failed in your packaging, so the food is spoiled and has been contaminated. Obviously, the best remedy for this is quality control, but product liability insurance. So doing business in the U.S., you'll need general liability insurance. You'll need, and if you're selling potentially dangerous products such as food and beverage, you'll also need product liability insurance, something to consider. I think I'll stop there on product liability. Let's switch to something entirely different, to immigration. So as I said, you can do your business from Lithuania. You can travel to trade shows and meet people. You can hire distributors, you can hire agents, but you yourself know that no one can do your business as well as you can yourself. And hiring people in the U.S. is expensive, and you better make sure they are good people and reliable people. But there's enough foreign companies, not just Lithuanians and Latvians, but foreign companies everywhere that rely on people in the U.S. and they get into trouble because they've picked the wrong people, or they're not loyal, or they've done something criminal. And at the end of the day, you have to make sure you've got your own people on the ground, especially if you are planning to build a major business in the U.S. At some point, you may decide that you cannot simply be operating from the U.S., from Lithuania, and you need your own people on the ground. And that's where, obviously, immigration comes in. And there are various options that you can consider. All of you are familiar with ESTA. So you can travel under your ESTAs already to the U.S., and you can do business as well, but as you know, they're limited. You can attend conferences under the ESTA. You can have negotiations. You can discuss deals and businesses, but you have to be careful that there's a line you cross where if you're doing too much, if you're working or you appear to be working in the U.S., you can get into trouble. And you should advise your teams as well, because these days when people arrive at the airport in the US, they'll be asked questions by officers. What are you doing here? And if you don't answer these questions right, or your people don't answer the questions right, you could be flagged as someone that's illegally working in the US. So it's very important that and once you get flagged and you get blacklisted, you could have trouble, or your people could have trouble coming into the US. And that's on the ESTA. Already. B1 is a short-term business visa. It's similar to the ESTA. You can pretty much do the same things that you can do on an ESTA, but it's for a longer period. Where it's on an ESTA, you have 90 days. B1 can be 6 months or even longer, and it's renewable. So if you need to be here longer, and B1 you can get through the State Department, through the embassy in the U.S. Embassy in Vilnius. But again, those are limited in what you can do. I've listed here H-1B. I won't discuss that. These are highly specialized workers. Most of them are Indian IT specialists. You may have seen in the news that the Trump administration now wants to charge $100,000 for each one of them. But we don't need to discuss that. But for long-term presence, if you are a Lithuanian company and you want to send people a long-term to the U.S., I would look at the E1, which is the trader visa, the E2 investor visa, or the L1A. Just a few words about each one. So the E1 and E2 are based on a bilateral treaty between the Lithuania and the US, and give certain advantages to Lithuanian citizens or companies that are controlled by Lithuanians, meaning more than 50% of the shares are owned by Lithuanians. The E1 is the trader visa. If you're doing substantial trade and at more than 50% of that trade is with the United States, then you may be eligible as the trader or the employees of the trader to get an E1 visa. That gives you the opportunity to remain in the US for several years. Your family can come as well. Your family can work. It's renewable. It's maybe 2 or 3 years. But there has to be substantial trade, and that could be very logical for your type of companies. But the trade has to be substantial trade, and there's no real definition of substantial trade, and it has to be more than 50% of the business of the trade has to be with the U.S. The E2 is a investor E2 investor visa, where you as the Lithuanian controlled company have performed a substantial investment in the U.S. There's no definition of what substantial means. Usually it means at least $100,000, but it really is a case-by-case determination. It depends on the type of business. And if you've made the substantial investment and you actually have documented it, then you can get this visa again for yourself as an investor, or for your team, but not your whole team, for your executives, for your supervisors, for certain key personnel. But these are not easy visas to get. You'll be submitting a stack of paper like this to document your trader status, your investor status, and to make sure you document all the requirements under law. The great thing about E1s and E2s are that they're administered by the State Department, meaning you apply for them in the U.S. Embassy in Vilnius, and you actually submit the application there, and you go for the interview there, and it makes it much simpler. In contrast, the L1A, this is the intercompany transfer manager. For that visa, you've got to go through the bureaucracy in Washington, the USCIS, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, which is more complex. But the L1A is different. It's this is to move managers within the group. So if you have your parent company in Lithuania and your daughter company in the U.S., and you want to move a manager. Again, it's got to be a specialized manager, someone who's been there for a certain amount of time, has certain supervisory skills, executive skills, or very specific technical skills. That manager can be moved to the U.S. for 2 years, 3 years, renewable up to 7 years. So that's all I'll say about immigration. But long term, if you want to be in the U.S., you may need people on the ground. And so you will most likely be thinking about E1s, E2s, L1As. And in the short term, obviously, you can travel to the US on your ESTA or on a B1, but be very careful in not getting yourself in trouble by doing things you're not authorized to be doing in the US, especially in this day and age, in the Trump age, where immigration is an important topic or on the agenda in the US. Let's go on. How much time do we have? It's 9:50.
Yeah, we still have some time. That's okay. No worries.
Okay. We're actually on our last segment here. So while we're all here, we're food and beverage companies, right? So I'm not a food and beverage specialist. This is highly regulated but in both federal level and the state level. If you're already exporting to the US, you probably know much about this already. We've got two major agencies, or three agencies, that provide oversight. You've got the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration, which oversees packaged goods, including baked goods, produce, dairy, seafood, all kinds of processed goods, and food labeling. There's a whole list of laws that you'll have to consider: the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, Fair Packaging and Labeling Act, Nutrition Labeling and Education Act, Food Safety Modernization Act, the Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act. It goes on and on and on. Food Facility Registration. If you're selling dietary supplements, there's a special law as well on dietary supplements. There are ways of verifying foreign food manufacturers. So these are all highly special. This is all federal law that you'll have to consider, and this is only part of it. Then the second agency is the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They primarily regulate high-risk foods: meat, poultry, which the ambassador mentioned, and certain egg products. They have the Food Safety and Inspection Service. They also regulate organic and raw food as far as how it's labeled and certified. And then for our beverage friends, we've got the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, which regulates and taxes, improves production, labeling, and importation of alcoholic beverages. Now, that's all at the federal level. Most of it is federal, but also states will have their own food safety codes. In many cases, it will solely just reflect the federal law, but there will be differences as well. It's local. There's also local licensing. I'm not sure if that's so important. If you're operating a local manufacturing facility and a restaurant or something, you'll have also local licensing and inspection by local authorities. But again, you have to deal with this very complex set of rules for food and beverage. Let's face it, is highly regulated everywhere in Europe and also in the US. And you'll have to make sure you're in compliance. For example, if you're importing food, we've got the Foreign Supplier Verification Program, under which your foreign suppliers, your factories in Lithuania, will have to meet certain U.S. safety standards. You have to prove that. You'll have to be providing notices to the FDA before you're shipping food or while it's in transit of what's coming to the U.S., where it was manufactured, descriptions, arrival date, port of entry. This is all monitored by the authorities. Labeling by the FDA has to be in compliance with all these things I've listed here. I don't think I need to list them all. But so I think that's the end of my presentation. I've touched on lots of different, again, this is not the intention is to go deep on any of these legal issues, but my intention today was just to flag the complexity of the legal system and some of the issues that you need to think about as you think about entering the U.S. market or operating in the U.S. market. And this is just legal, of course. You've got probably more important things that are important for you are, as I said, identifying clients and distributors in this very large and complex market. But do not forget about legal, do not forget about tax, do not forget about accounting, because if you don't, you can get into trouble. And the U.S. is a expensive market to do business in. Legal services, advisory fees are higher than they are in the U.S., but it's something that you do need to invest in if you want to be successful and if you want to stay out of trouble. Maybe I'll stop with that. And how much time do we have left for questions?
We have like a few minutes for a few questions, and also we are waiting for the wrap up of Mr. Mindaugas.
Okay.
So I think that, yeah. So yeah, thanks again, Mr. Ivars, for valuable information. And despite the fact, after so much important information, everything may seem a bit overwhelming right now. So Lithuanian producers will know exactly where to turn when they need help in navigating US legal aspects. And so now I invite everyone to move to our Q&A session, and asking if our participants have any questions to you. If yes, so please raise your hand or just inquire in English. If you have some questions at the moment, because I don't see much hands now, but actually I have a few questions that I've received beforehand. So one of them, so does the taxation of imported goods differ between individual US states?
Again, I'm not a tax specialist, but for importation, if you're importing into the U.S., likely not, it's going to be their federal import regulations and taxes and tariffs. Whether it's going, a particular good is going to one state or another, I don't think there should be a difference. Once it arrives in the U.S. and you're selling, of course, there are going to be sales taxes, different levels of sales tax in different states. So once you have your products at a facility, at a warehouse in the U.S. and you're distributing them, then of course different rates of sales tax amongst the states will be of relevance. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And in your experience advising the food and beverage exporters entering the U.S. Market, what are the top 3 legal misunderstandings to non-U.S. companies? They have about the U.S. business law. Maybe you have.
Maybe it's not just food and beverage.
Maybe for
top 3 misunderstandings. Well, I've already discussed many of the differences. First is the complexity. Of companies in Latvia or Europe thinking that the legal system in the U.S. is similar to Lithuania, where it's not. That means sometimes companies or people in Europe try to do things on their own, where they think it's cheaper to incorporate on my own and set up my company on my own, and then they do it incorrectly. That's the case anywhere. Not using professional advisors, or not caring about your taxes, and then getting it 2 years later you realize that you have not filed your taxes and you're faced with fines and that kind of thing. So just not being in compliance. What else? Well, there's many things that I mentioned already. Not signing contracts, going into arrangements with your cooperation partners on a handshake, and then getting into trouble later because you don't have a contract and you get into a dispute. I think I mentioned many other things, but the top 3, I think I mentioned some of them. What else could I mention? Engaging people, as I said, when you engage people incorrectly, you fail to comply with employment law. and then you get into a dispute with that person, and that person then brings you to court, and you're spending thousands of dollars to litigate against this person because you failed to set up the employment compliance correctly at the beginning.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Evers, for the answers. I see that Mr. Mindaugas has to have the question, so please, Mindaugas.
Yes, thank you, Irma. I can only add to what Evers has just said that, this is my second year at the embassy in Washington, D.C., and I have heard some cases of Lithuanian companies who had some very expensive mistakes here in the U.S. And, I think that getting some professional advice would have helped to prevent those losses. So yeah, I can only support this comment.
Yeah, thank you so much. So as we are running out of time and we are coming to the close of today's seminars, I want to invite again you, Mr. Mindaugas, to deliver the wrap-up remarks, and we look forward to hearing your final insights and reflections on today's discussions.
Okay,
so please,
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I will be brief to wrap up this webinar. First of all, thank you very much, Evers, for your presentation. I think we heard a lot of useful information, many insights, and I hope that this will help companies to decide on the best way forward if they wish to expand their business to the United States. The major reason why we decided to organize this webinar is that as I mentioned, after my 1 year at the embassy here, I can confidently say that the US is still a land of opportunities, and we work to help Lithuanian companies to create more opportunities here in the US. And Americans might want to buy your product, and very often, to be honest, we have a very good product to offer, but they will buy it their way. And so if you want to be successful, you have to follow the market rules. You must make it easy for them to work with you. And I hope this webinar has been helpful for you in finding your path to success in the US market. And my last 2 points. First, I'd like to highlight that if you need a deeper consultation or would like to have an individual session, please do not hesitate to follow up with Evers directly to discuss possible cooperation. And finally, as Ambassador has already mentioned at the very beginning, I kindly invite you to mark in your calendars April 27-29 next year. These are the dates of the upcoming North American Lithuanian Business Forum, which is probably the biggest business event for Lithuanian community. This time it will take place in Los Angeles, and we have already begun preparing the program. And our team in LA is working hard to secure the best location for this event. And once that is done, we will launch the promotional campaign. And yep, that's all from my side. Thank you, Evers, for your presentation. And thank you, Irma, for moderating and helping to organize this webinar. And to everyone, thank you very much for your time. I look forward to seeing you on future occasions.
Thank you as well. From my side, thank you very much for this opportunity. And I look forward to meeting you in Vilnius or in Kaunas or in LA as well, or in Riga, or in New York.
Okay, so thank you so much for everyone. So as Mindaugas mentioned and the ambassador mentioned, so if you have any further questions or would like to personalized support, the Litfood and the Embassy of Lithuania to the United States teams are here to help you and explore these opportunities. Of course, once again, thanks to our speakers, His Excellency Ambassador Gediminas Varvuolis, Mr. Ivars Slokenbergs, and Mr. Mindaugas Simanaitis.